Я ухожу.
И в сортире их замочим, в конце концов.
Свобода лучше, чем не свобода.
Крым и Севастополь возвращаются в родную гавань.
Welcome to InfoCom. In the new episode of Focus on Russia, our guest is sociologist Artyom Tonoyan. Artyom, welcome back to our show.
Thank you, Tigran, for inviting me back to your show. Greetings from Minneapolis, where the weather is getting rather cold.
Yeah, so today we're gonna discuss, of course, the latest escalation in the region and Russia's role in all of it. Russia's actions or inaction have been heavily criticized in Armenia in recent days. So you, as a scholar who has edited a volume on Russia's approaches towards the conflict, what could you say about Russia's positions lately? Can we see any sort of parallels between Russian attitudes towards the conflict nowadays and in the past? And has the conflict in Ukraine played a role in changing or, I don't know, modifying Russia's attitudes?
I think the answer to all of those questions are fairly obvious. As far as Russia's war in Ukraine, it has absolutely reconfigured Russia's calculus about his engagements near and far. It has become sort of less proactive than before, and for obvious reasons. The war in Ukraine is sucking up most of Russia's resources, so it invites a certain kind of recalibration about its foreign policy engagement, power projections in other parts of the world, and the Caucasus is not exception to it. We saw that Russia was actively involved in trying to mitigate what was happening in Kazakhstan, but it was also wary of its abilities to do so in that regard. So it has absolutely changed its calculus. And in the Caucasus, it has its actions or inaction, as you put it, is sort of mystifying in a sense, because the Caucasus being the traditional backyard of Russia, I don't like that term, but it is sort of a conventional way of describing Russia's view of the region. It has been mystifyingly, in a sense, less proactive than previously, which leads us to believe that there may have been some quid pro quos, some internal agreements with the Aliyev regime, and Russia sort of removing its protective hand from over Armenia and letting Aliyev and Turkey do their way with Armenia. So yes, but there is also the side that I think needs some understanding and some elaboration, is how all of this has been portrayed in the Russian media, because I edited the volume, so I pay close attention to the Russian media, and the way this round of escalation and Azerbaijan's aggression has been covered in the Russian media has been markedly different than even the war in 2020. I mean, for obvious reasons, most of Russian media is concentrated on reporting from Ukraine, from Donbass, and the debacle there. And so it is understandable that Russia's media's attention would be wholly concentrated on the region. But at the same time, given the strategic importance of the South Caucasus isthmus in the traditional Russian foreign policy establishment thinking, you would think that there would be much more reporting, more reporters on the ground reporting from the region. So it leads me to believe that Russia has come to a certain way of looking at the problem where sort of Armenia is not figuring in its calculus for its power projection or for its foreign policy engagements. It's not looming as large as it used to. which is in a sense a worrisome development because of Armenia's security interests and because of Armenia's security dilemmas and the state of the Armenian army and the society. But it is what it is. The realities have changed, and we have to deal with these realities in a real way, with having a real appreciation of the changing dynamics on the ground, and draw certain lessons, draw certain conclusions from all of this, and perhaps recalibrate our own foreign policy engagements. I don't know how it would look like at the moment, but this is also an opportunity for Armenia to reconsider certain things, and it will take capable minds to come up with some good ideas, or at least some ideas that may or may not work, but at least there are ideas.
Yeah, we'll come back to this question or issue of probable shift in the Armenian foreign policy later, but I would like to follow up on my previous question. We can all agree that Russia at this point has less capability and less willingness to restrain Azerbaijan. But do you think it still has some sort of red lines? What Azerbaijan has to do to make Russia react somehow?
I'm sure Russia has red lines. I'm sure, there was middle of the century American comedian Groucho Marx, who has this fantastic saying, "These are my principles. If you don't like them, I have others." So Russia's red lines are sort of these ever-changing principles. If we don't like these principles, they have others that they can offer. So I'm sure Russia has red lines. And another thing that this reminds me of is, Donald Trump's famous saying that if he stands in the middle of the Fifth Avenue and he shoots somebody dead, his electorate will always, fall in line and will vote for him because of who he is. So I think Azerbaijan in this situation is like Donald Trump. I mean, they are doing whatever they want. They even attacked, I don't know how credible the reports were, but they appear to be credible. They, at least some Russian soldiers had come under shelling and under fire, and Russia's response to it was mute, just like Russia's response was mute when the helicopter was shot down over Armenia during the 2020 war, or on the eve of the ceasefire agreement or the tripartite declaration. So I don't know what it would take for Russia to sort of become conscious of its own red lines and try to enforce them in the South Caucasus. But all indications, everything points out to the fact that Russia, has, or when I say Russia, I mostly mean Vladimir Putin. Putin has become rather comfortable with the things that they are developing in the South Caucasus. He appears to be rather chummy with Ilham Aliyev and Aliyev's patron Erdogan, which is not new. But seeing these, images being played is rather worrisome. So I don't know. Russia has become, who would think that in all of this, Russia would be less predictable than, say, Iran, right? Because we have been always told that Iran is this unpredictable regime. But come to think of it, that Russia, at least when it comes to the South Caucasus, has become wholly unpredictable in a way. We don't know. We don't have, I'm not a Kremlinologist, and I'm not a psychoanalyst to analyze Putin's fears and apprehensions when it comes to the South Caucasus, but he feels rather comfortable, I guess. And absent a massive death toll of some Russian peacekeepers, I don't think Russia or Vladimir Putin will take any action to enforce any sort of red lines. I mean, it sounds very elaborate and it sounds rather windy, what I'm trying to say here, but it also betrays a certain uncertainty in trying to read the Russian position on this issue, because we thought we knew what Russians' strategic interests in the regions were, keeping other powers out, the Europeans, the Americans, Turkey. But now that Turkey is in the region and has entered the region rather forcefully, it has rendered a lot of our thinking about Russia's strategic interests and the pursuit of these interests rather unpredictable.
Yeah, so in recent days, there have been lots of conversations in Armenia about the necessity to leave the CSTO. Both political parties, so some mainstream analysts even say that this is the point to do it. So I have several questions related to this issue. First of all, what is your take on this? How realistic is this scenario? And secondly, what are the risks connected with these problems, and what are the pros and cons connected with this possible process?
Well, how realistic it is both realistic and unrealistic. Okay, the CSTO has proven itself to be a useless entity that is wholly operational according to the whims and wishes of one person, Vladimir Putin. CSTO can work effectively if Vladimir Putin wishes so, although, formally there are all these formal discussions and so on and so forth. So it has proven, in the Armenian case at least, it has proven time and again, not once, time and again, it has proven to be a useless entity. It has no tangible benefits that we can quantify. There is no data point to show that CSTO has done anything that has been beneficial on the ground at the moment when it is needed most. So, but in terms of how realistic would Armenia's ditching of CSTO be, I think there are certain dangers associated with it, and I'm sure some smart people appreciate these dangers. Yes, emotionally and psychologically, it would be, probably a good move for Armenia to ditch, but at the same time, seeing what has happened to Ukraine and getting Putin to become ever more angry with Armenia is not something that Armenia can afford. So it is a lose-lose proposition. One part of me says yes, pull the trigger, start a formal mechanism and formal process of getting Armenia out of the CSTO membership. It's like holding, it's like having the Communist Party membership card in your pocket, which was a pretty useless thing in the Soviet Union. So one part of me says, yes, we should do it. But on the other part is, we, or not we, but the Armenian government and the Armenian society has to understand all the dangers associated with something radical like that, because it will be perceived as something radical. And I don't think at this juncture it is realistic without having to pay probably a costlier cost than we have paid hitherto. I don't know if that makes sense, but that sort of is. And I'm sorry, I missed the second part of the question.
I was talking about the pros and cons, but I think you have answered that question as well.
Yeah.
And my final question is about the US re-engagement in the region. We've seen certain diplomatic activity coming from Washington. There are reports that the ceasefire was reached through US mediation. The foreign ministers met in New York, again through US mediation. What should we expect from the US in the coming weeks or months? Should more practical steps be followed after these events that have already took place, and is the US capable of at least partially filling the void that Russia has left in the region?
Well, the US engagement, given the circumstances, is very welcome. As we know, since 2020, Azerbaijan and to a great extent Russia have, from mountaintop to valley, proclaimed the death of the OSCE Minsk group. At first, there was the acrimony leading up to the war in Ukraine, and then that sort of played into the hand of this way of thinking that the Minsk group is dead. But then the American diplomats and the Europeans were saying that by all means the OSCE Minsk group is not dead, so they're bringing the defibrillators, trying to revive a person that is sort of in a coma or has passed out. So the U.S. engagement in the region is welcome, and it is also welcome in what sense? Since Donald Trump, at least, we had seen how the U.S. had, in a sense, downgraded its diplomatic engagement in the region, with the exception of perhaps Georgia, where it still pursued certain diplomatic channels and certain diplomatic objectives. But for all intents and purposes, the South Caucasus was not figuring large in the American foreign policy. And the 2020 war, the war in Ukraine has made it clear that a power vacuum is for the South Caucasus is super dangerous, and it has whetted Azerbaijan's appetite. And Russia being unwilling or unable to curtail or curb Azerbaijan's enthusiasm, another diplomatic force with the wherewithals and the mechanisms to sort of enforce some sort of ceasefire is always welcome. So in terms of how practical will this be, it wholly depends on the State Department, and it wholly depends on the American foreign policy establishment, including the think tankdom, to realize that the conflict and other round of war in the region will not be beneficial to European or American foreign policy objectives, because it will bring a different set of actors who will be entrenched even further in the region, and it may see American interests being degraded to a degree that will take some time to recover. So I think some capable minds in the American foreign policy establishment are capable of thinking and seeing through this, and hopefully in terms of practical effects, maybe some sort of a carrot and some sort of a crime and punishment and good behavior and reward will work down the line. Some sort of a sanction regime, perhaps, or more than just a finger wagging on Azerbaijan and patting Armenia's back with a moral support. There are ways. There is always there are ways to do these things, and when there is a way, when there is a will, there is a way, as they like to say in the United States. So we have to work on making sure that the will and the way sort of coincide.
Artyom, thank you for an interesting conversation. Always a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you, Tigran, for having me.